Well, good morning, and really a pleasure to be here. I understand we'll do this without translation, so I'll try to speak clearly and slowly. It's always difficult to prioritize what to share when you have a lot on your mind and a short time. So what I have decided to do is to share a number of examples and then to reflect on what they say about the big question we are discussing. And in a way, what we're discussing is what is the secret or what is the way to create not only competitive and successful business, but also a competitive and successful society. This image is a favorite of mine. It's not that new. But how did this small country, Denmark, in the north of Europe, which has no resources. I mean, it's a flat country, it has no iron ore, it has no mountains, it has some reasonable agricultural land, that's maybe it, still become, in many different ways, a successful and prosperous society. And if you look at the different rankings and these different tables, which by the way, we don't really look at in Denmark. Very few people in government or in business are aware of rankings such as the IMD competitiveness report, such as the United Nations digital rankings, such as the World Happiness report, or even the different rankings on sustainability. Actually, if there's one headline that sometimes would reach the media, it would be if Denmark is ranked somewhere on this one, because that is what takes up most of the attention of politicians and citizens, whereas this is something we almost take for granted. But you could say, how did we get there? And I'll try to explore that a little bit, but I'll also explore how are we today working for the future. So I'm not just looking to the past, but maybe more to the future. The American political scientist Francis Fukuyama wrote an essay some years ago called Getting to Denmark. And the essay, Getting to Denmark, is not about Denmark, but it's about how to build a well-functioning society. What are the elements we need? And many of the elements in Denmark are exactly the same as in Japan. Market economy, democracy, relatively high trust, functioning institutions, all of those elements that we know. But I think that there is something more. We could call it the power of design. Now, I'm no longer the CEO of the Danish Design Center, so I don't have to say that design is great or is the right answer to everything. I used to have to say that. But I think there's a question of design as making conscious decisions about the future. That is design. Design is how we shape and make our world to work better. And that is somehow what we have done. And we often talk about Denmark as a design society. And by the way, when I walk the streets here in Tokyo, or visit Kyoto, I would say Japan is definitely a design society. So, some examples. This is Ørsted. It's named after the inventor of electromagnetism, which is Danish. But actually, until recently, the name of the company was literally Danish Oil and Gas. About 15 years ago, a very forward-looking CEO, who by the way was a former permanent secretary of the Ministry of Finance, so it's a CEO of a privately oriented competitive company, but coming from government, he suggested that this company should go from black to green. And within a few years, the strategy was adopted, and today it's more than 90% of the energy production of this company is sustainable, renewable energy. And they started doing it, and then after some years they realized they had to rebrand and have a totally different name and rethink. recently I listened to the CEO of the company discussing how they look at business and how they look at the future. And one of the very interesting things with Ørsted, mainly they manufacture or support and build infrastructure for offshore wind turbines, is that they are sharing their intellectual property freely with the competition, including the big oil companies. Shell, ExxonMobil. Why would they do that? And as the CEO says, they're doing it because to accelerate the new market around green transition and renewables, it must go very fast. Everybody has to contribute, even big oil. And the faster everybody learns, everybody has knowledge, the faster we can expand the market. So it is in their interest to share their intellectual property and their knowledge, and they do that strategically. Another example is Grundfos. It's a world leader in pump and water technology, very ambitious around net zero, and again you can see a pattern here driven by sustainability. This is the pumps they create, by the way. It's a winner of the Danish Design Award, partly because it's very functional, but also because it's very, very easy to use for workers. But my point here is actually that the company has a strategy to reach 300 million people in the world to deliver clean drinking water, including in the global south. And that is the core of their strategy. Not how much profit to make, but how many people to help. And as the CEO said, when he published this strategy, the reason we can do this is because we are owned by a foundation, not in this by shareholders. Because if we are owned by shareholders, we probably could not have a strategy like this. Another example is moving into a whole different area. This is consumer goods. This is truly the company here is manufacturing and producing plant-based food. So there's no beef in this burger, and there is a growing sense, at least in Denmark, that we cannot keep only eating beef if we're going to save the climate. So we have to shift towards more plant-based food. This is a small and medium-sized company, but they have created a network, like an association, a membership organization, for everyone in the plant-based food industry. This company down here is the Boston Consulting Group, which are advisors. You have some of their biggest competitors in the food system are members. Their competition are members of an organization that they started. The regulating authorities are part of it, marketing authorities, the whole ecosystem of actors that are creating value in terms of shifting food systems towards plant-based sustainable food. Why would they do that? Because they want to accelerate the shift towards a new market. And the faster they do it, the better for them. The market will grow. It's good for them. It's good for the competition. Everybody wins. Small Danish company, you might have heard about it, the most valuable toy company in the world right now, Lego. I want to mention them not only because we have some practitioners of serious play and using Lego for creativity and innovation in companies, but also because this has always been a company driven by purpose. Lego literally means, it's an abbreviation of Got, which means play well. Play well. And the founder basically had the vision to create better toys, because children deserve great toys. Children deserve better than toys that break or toys that are bad quality or bad craftsmanship. So this is good quality, this is good craftsmanship, but it's also a play system and a learning system. And the learning also goes, and the contribution to society goes way beyond just the Lego. So the foundation that owns, one of the foundations that owns Lego, has actually now funded the Denmark's next children's hospital, which is being built right now. It will be the Mary Elizabeth Hospital, named after the Queen of Denmark now. And bringing not only funding to build a hospital, but the way this hospital was built was through service design, and by involving children and young people in designing the services and the user experience of the hospital. And actually, through the design workshops, they found out what kind of value, what kind of process, what kind of space to create for children that are sick, and then they just commissioned architects to create a wrapping around it. But this hospital is actually a service design. Finally, this says because the everyday life is digital. In Denmark, we have a very, very digitized public service. Very digitized. How did that happen? Well, part of the explanation is actually in this folder. This is the cross-public in a digital strategy 2022 to 2025. And on the front of this cover of the Danish digital strategy for government, you have all three layers of government. Government, state, municipalities, and the regions of Denmark. The regions run our hospitals. 3 levels. And creating this strategy with 3 levels of government, I can tell you, is not easy. It takes longer than it would have if it was central government just making it and then pushing it out. But by involving local governments, 97 local governments, and their association, you get a bottom-up inclusion of those that create services directly to citizens. Schools, elder care, transportation, all of the different things that matter in everyday life. They are included in the strategy building. So when the strategy is there, everybody agrees. And that is probably a key reason why we have the world's most digital public sector. One other reason, I should say, because I asked a good friend of mine is the head of the digital agency of Denmark. And she, I met her the other day and I said, Tanya, when you digitize, do you think about our ranking? And she said, I don't care about our ranking. We know we are high, but the reason we have succeeded in digitization is not by pursuing a ranking. It's by starting with the fundamentals 50 years ago to give every single citizen a personal identification number. And then we built block by block by block on top of that and did everything that was sensible that we could do to do that. And that's why we're here now. Without that infrastructure, we couldn't have done it. But that's what we built on. What makes sense? How can we start? And then we build from there. So what these organizations have in common, very, very different examples, private sector, public sector, is that they are what I would call mission-driven, which they're all driven by a long-term purpose. They're driven by a wide view of their role in society that goes way beyond one product or one market. They are collaborative in the sense that they look to partners, private sector, public sector, cross-sector. And then they're in different ways design-led. I can put it in other words. No, I would say put it in other words, design-led. By design-led we mean human, we mean aesthetic, and we mean functional. Has to work for people, has to be beautiful, has to be effective. So by having these 3 aspects in different combinations, that's in many ways how some of the best companies, but also the best public organizations work. You can say it's a mindset that is focused on creating shared value. Value for people, value for environment, value for people outside of the country, value for citizens, value for different organizations that are involved. And this question of shared value means that profits and finances are part of the equation, but just a part. Yeah, this is the quote from, I'm not putting the name because it's in a way informal, but it's what the head of the digital agency told me. But this is not necessarily easy. It sounds easy, but what makes sense? It can be very hard, because that could be about changing things, right? And it can be about very difficult discussions about what is most sensible to who, to when, and how. Maybe in conclusion, to kind of summarize some of the things that I have been learning around the future of innovation that fits in with this idea of mission-driven change, and mission-driven companies and mission-driven societies. Now, one is to think about the future, and not just short-term, but longer-term, and start your developing there. So using creative methods, using the workshops to elicit the vision and the imagination of what future do we want, rather than just starting with what the problem is now. So being driven by a sense of what is a good society, what is the role of our business, what should be the everyday life of people, and how can we make that happen. Shifting from a single project or single product to a portfolio, which means looking at the many different things that are needed. Now, the company Naturally I showed you before with the plant-based burgers, they could just focus on great products. They could do that, and they would probably do all right. But by looking at a portfolio of many different things, of course it's marketing and branding, but it's also regulation. It's also influencing those that create the playing ground and regulatory context for the plant-based food system. That's also important. The knowledge brokers that are the consultancies, like Boston Consulting Group or others, that are cross-disseminating knowledge are maybe also important. So taking a portfolio and a systemic perspective means you can impact much, much more. Collaborative funding, which means not only looking for funding as competition, but also in collaboration. We see that coming from the Danish government, for example, in funding some of our big green transition work. We see that we need to actually, by making some early investments, we get more investments back. Again, the Naturally example, the plant-based example, by creating an association where everybody can join. They are paying, of course, for creating the association, but once you have it, all the members will pay. And suddenly you have more funding coming in, and more knowledge coming in, and more resources coming in. The same we're seeing in some of the Danish government's missions around green transition. Government invests, let's say, 100 million euros, but then some of the big players and some of the energy systems are coming in, and they are offering much, much more. Because when there's a compelling vision for the future, then you can join, and you can see how can I contribute also with resources. Top down and bottom up. Top down is strategy, it's executive offices, it's policy, it's the high level. Bottom up is inclusion, involvement, engaging. It can be citizens, it can be customers, it can be local governments, but thinking of moving both things at the same time. That is not so easy to do. It's often much easier to say either we just do things from the top, or we let's see things, what can happen from the bottom among, for example, startups or other things. But here we need to do both. Share data and knowledge, create transparency, the generosity of sharing, going beyond competition, putting out your IP. And finally, governance as an investment. Governance, what is that? That is the ways in which we make decisions together. And to make decisions together, we have to have rules, we have to have procedures, we have to have places, we have to maybe create new types of places, maybe have to create new innovative platforms for making joint decisions on where to go. And in different ways, all of these organizations have found new ways of doing things. Governance is that you create a strategy for the Danish digital public sector between local government, regions, and the state together. And I'm not saying that this innovation practice is old news, because we still have to do that. We still have to design great products and services. We still have to digitize specific processes. We still have to sometimes do either or. We still have to compete sometimes. So what I'm trying to share here is what I see emerging as, and I'm not the only one seeing it, as a more systemic, more impactful, more long-term, more holistic way of viewing innovation. In a way, turning this model almost upside down. And within this model, this one I think can exist as well, but I think we need to see, we are seeing a push towards it. So, in conclusion, the truth of the world is that it's something we make. We create the world, we create our organizations, we create our services, we create our cities. It is something that we make, and we can make it different. Now, it's easy to forget, because there's so much inertia, and there's so much history we're building on top of. And that is also important. That we sometimes forget that we can be more creative, we can be more visionary, we can propose new visions, and we can start making them happen. And we can make them happen that are beautiful, functional, human, aesthetic, with design. Thank you for listening.